This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good afternoon. This is JoAnn Forrester, the Empress of Biz, and she is with the Duke of Business, Sal Acosta. And we're here today to talk about something that all of you should be aware of. If you have not had a cyber attack somewhere along the way, you're going to. And I was looking up some statistics, which is really frightening, is that taking a look at what's happening in the cyber world, in 2016, uh, a business was being attacked once every 40 seconds. Now in 2019, it's 14 seconds. And in 2020, it's 11 seconds. So that's scary. And the issues that we as business owners, um, well, let's put it this way. It's frightening to have a gun pulled on you, and I've had that happen. But and you know, at least you know who you're dealing with. Let's put it that way. Uh, but with a cyber attack, you don't know who you're dealing with, and you don't know what's happened. So I was delighted to have Russ York, who is with Liberty Insurance Company, talk about cyber crimes and cyber insurance. Welcome, Russ.
Hi, JoAnn. It's nice to be here.
Welcome, Sal.
Thank you, JoAnn. Very nice to be here sharing the stage with you.
Oh, yeah. I was particularly interested in this, Russ, because we had developed software at one time, and that was an expensive proposition. And one of the things that we talked about in the development was how you protect what you have, but also a number of our clients. My target market is usually small business, 15 employees under, but they also get attacked. And so, you know, we had to deal with the idea of what was going to happen if our company hit the big time. What was going to, you know, how were we going to have to protect ourselves, and what was our shield, like insurance? So tell us about what exactly you do.
So I'm a broker with Liberty Insurance Agency, and we focus our business on commercial property and casualty. Myself, I focus a lot on cyber and crime policies. These are policies designed to protect businesses of all sizes in the event of crime. Deals with particularly loss of funds by malfeasance, social engineering, something like that. Cyber is there to protect you in the event of a failure, of network failure, of privacy on that network, a data breach. There's a thin line between the two. They often go hand in hand. There was something that you mentioned right from the beginning regarding small businesses, and there's a huge myth out there regarding small businesses, and that they're not subject of a hacker's attack, and it's completely wrong. You know, they're the largest pool of fish. I could give you examples and stories left and right of small businesses that were hacked that led to catastrophic losses at times. So,
Hey, Ross, let me ask you a question, because I know in other types of insurance, like maybe, you know, commercial insurance for a commercial building, part of the way the insurance is quoted is the insurance company comes in and does an audit, and then based on how you come out on that audit, the rates will be higher or lower. And quite honestly, they also use the audit to make some recommendations for you to lower your rate. So in this sort of cyber sphere hacking world, do the companies also come in and do an audit, like, hey, you should have this backup, this firewall, this software, whatever, and then do they adjust your rates based on what you have and what you don't have, and can you use that as a way to improve your defenses?
Absolutely. So one of the carriers, there's several of the carriers that we work with. They will recommend, usually through some sort of third party. Sometimes it's in-house, but going through a few exercises, vulnerability tests, penetration tests, a cyber audit, if you will. They want to know what you're doing proactively to prevent a breach from occurring. And those things can certainly affect what your premium is going to be on those type of policies. There are a lot of things that can be done from a technical standpoint. Malware, the type of network you run, how you handle remote workers, pretty popular these days. But they also, and it's something that's a little bit harder to quantify, is we need to try to illustrate to them that there's a culture built around safety and security of the data that company is responsible for, and that's not really an IT issue. There's not a piece of technology that's going to help you with that. That's something that's going to come from your C-suite, from your boardroom, and trickle down. It's helpful to see if a company already has in their handbook, in their employee guide, a policy on how data is treated, or how employees who are working remotely will access that data. So all those things will come into play when putting together a good cyber policy.
20 years ago, well, Sal and I did a show on what was it easier to start businesses, 20, 30 years ago than it is now. And we kind of disagreed, but we really
surprise.
Yeah. But we really didn't have to worry about this. Even I'd say 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But the attack on the systems just keep on growing, and that's frightening. With cyber insurance, what exactly is that, and what do you protect people from?
So cyber insurance really is, there's, as I mentioned before, there's it's often a thin line between cyber policy, cyber liability, and a crime policy. And there are certain aspects, social engineering, I think, is where a lot of them it gets to a little bit of a gray area. But a cyber policy is there to protect you when your network, when all your technology, when those systems fail. And it's often a third party. So when records are stolen, some of the things that you could expect to find is there's, by law, you need to notify the folks whose records have been stolen. And there's cost associated with doing that. There's also legal and regulatory fees that are going to come your way in the event, and after a breach. You may need to find someone to coach you through. That's something that some of the better carriers actually will provide a data breach coach to kind of hold your hand through that process. But the loss of data, the PR, the legal, those ramifications. What else? The business interruption. So loss income can be covered in that as well. Forensics Could also be that's the investigation of cyber forensics, where you bring in an expert to find out, to kind of reverse engineer, find out where the hack took place. There's a cost associated with that. And then also your better cyber policies will cover the betterment of your infrastructure. So if your forensic expert comes and says, this occurred, and the only way to prevent it from occurring is you need to update your infrastructure, your workstations, your servers, so on and so forth. The better cyber policies will cover that part as well.
Hey, Russ, let me ask you this question because, for example, I know that there's policies for business interruption. I know there's policies for, when an employee steals something. And I know sometimes it's just like, and you're the expert on this, but like these umbrella policies where you have just a loss above a certain amount, and then the umbrella just kind of covers it regardless of what it is. I would imagine it's very helpful to have somebody like you that's kind of like a broker to even help you put together all these different coverages in the most cost-effective manner. So on the one hand, you're not paying for overlap, but on the other hand, you're not leaving gaps uncovered. So, I mean, could you talk a little bit about how, again, you make sure that you're not paying double, like, your cyber may cover business interruption, but you may have business interruption, and you may have a policy to cover employee theft, but so how do you again make sure there's no overlaps that you're paying double for, but that there's also no gaps?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where a good agent, it really is the difference, plain and simple. And knowing the products, knowing the policies that we put together for our customers is really all it comes down to. Sometimes at the surface, you might think that there are overlapping coverages, like revenue loss under maybe a business interruption or business disruption policy. A true, as it's a standalone business interruption policy really focuses around like a direct physical loss. So if there was a fire or flood at your place of business and you were unable to continue, a data breach, really there's no direct physical loss, even though you may be shut down for some period of time. So sometimes kind of getting into that second, third layer of the coverage to understand what is going to trigger that coverage. So in the event of a cyber breach, no fire, your place of business is perfectly fine. You can walk in. But if you're reliant on, some piece of software that runs the business, like so many do, like a CRM, like an ERP, something like that maybe is down for a period of time that causes an interruption in your revenue flow, there's where the cyber policy may trigger. With regards to an umbrella, always great to have. You want to, with umbrellas, you want to make sure that you don't run into things like, if you don't have to have some level of, self-retained piece of that. You want your umbrella to kick in as soon as the underlying limit is pierced without having to shell out more. So the umbrella is a great thing to have, especially if you're a type of business where the size of your database is significant.
I had a client who, when you were talking about fire, she actually built computers. I mean, they were up to over 30 employees. They built and distributed computers to schools and larger organizations. And they were bragging about they are now paperless. Well, this is the paper queen here. So I have more computers than I should probably, but we have them there. But one of the days, right after I left, there was a terrible storm. And she was saying, we're now paperless. And I'm like, mm-hmm. And I was getting them money. What I do is I get clients money, among other things. And that evening, that storm hit and lightning hit that building. Everything was wiped out. Every computer on that premise. I mean, gone, everything. And the only person who had data was me. Now, what would that come under? Is that would you cover cyber insurance, cover that, or is that a different thing?
That would be a different thing, and that's something where lightning. Now we're getting into some of the risk 101, and you'd have to kind of take a look at the policy to find out. Some policies you might not have something that triggers the coverage. Some you would, some you wouldn't. You'd have to kind of get into that specific policy to find out. But ideally, that's going to kind of be under, if it hit the building, if it was their own building, or if they rented that building, those are the things they're going to have to take into consideration, because although the fire destroyed all of their belongings, the cause of fire was a lightning strike. Might be a different situation if it was the fire was caused by an electrical problem, or some other cause that created that flame. Does that make sense?
Well, what it says to me is I better have a good insurance adjuster, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and again, it goes back to a good broker to make sure that you don't have any overlaps and any gaps. Russ, let me ask you about this, because I was actually reading about this the other day. So now there's a lot of, what they're calling ransomware attacks, where they basically encrypt your data and then they ask you to provide money to decrypt it and get it back up and running. I was actually surprised that the average ransomware attack, and don't quote me on the numbers, but it was a relatively low number that they were asking for to give you the key. I don't know, $10,000, $100,000. But obviously, it's partly a negotiation. How valuable is your data? How big of an organization are you? How much money do they think you have? And what your next best alternative is, and all those things. But do some of these policies pay, or can some of these policies pay for you to pay that ransom to get the key to decrypt your data?
Yes, a better cyber policy will have a limit built in for ransom, and some of the carriers at the forefront of cyber policy will actually bring in a negotiator, believe it or not, to negotiate with the hackers.
Wow.
I've read of a case recently where an organization, a large organization, I don't want to drop names, but they had $1 million limit for ransomware. Hackers were asking for over that limit, and the negotiators were able to talk it down to around $950,000 because it was within the limit of the coverage, and they paid it to move forward, because time is money, and sometimes the least course of resistance for the organization is to say, let's pay this, let's move on. Fortunately, I've read this in a number of different places that although these are bad actors that are hacking our systems and holding your data hostage, it's a rather high percentage, near 90%, that actually do give you the key to decrypt your data once they're paid. So based upon that, I think, yes, you should have that coverage built into your policy. And a better policy is going to give you someone to help you negotiate through that.
Let me ask a follow-up question, and I'll turn it over back to JoAnn. And this is more of a sort of philosophical, political question, but I'll ask it, and you can answer it any way you want. Is the fact that all these companies are getting these cyber insurance policies and these ransomware policies then actually helping motivate that more of this activity happens? Because now they know, to your point, exactly that. Say, hey, I'm going to lock up all this data. I'm going to hope to have an insurance policy. And then basically, I'm going to take it to the limit of the insurance policy. The company doesn't care because the insurance company's paying. The insurance company is writing it off, as an offset to all these premiums that they're getting. So is that actually motivating this industry? And then maybe the second question related to that is, I know a lot of these bad actors that you mentioned, I think, are offshore. And then is there something we can do at a worldwide level or an intergovernmental level to try to rein this in a little bit so it doesn't keep happening and happening?
So the first part of your question there is, yeah, I mean, this is more my opinion. I don't think this, I'm basing this on anything that I've read or facts that I know of, but the fact that there are policies, there are monies backing these incidents, it can perpetuate that act. There, case in point, there are companies that have been held ransom multiple times because they paid the ransom quickly.
That goes into the second question.
Yeah. What can we do to kind of stymie that? Certainly go and whether you have in-house IT people or you utilize maybe an outsourced firm, an MSP or something like that. Make sure that they are testing for where are those vulnerabilities. Number one, in the infrastructure, where do those hacks take place? But again, a big piece of it, because so much of this activity occurs through phishing and spear phishing. I could give you a great example of a small company that was phished that led to one of the biggest hacks we've all known about, and it's locally here, near and dear to Pittsburgh. But creating that culture where people are aware, people are cautious of what they're opening, what they click on, and understand that, okay, if this email doesn't look right to me, what do I do with it? Do I send it to someone? Do I have someone, take a look at this to say, hey, let's blacklist this IP address so this doesn't come back to us. So there's a number of things that can be done.
One of the things that I noticed is that when people get into playing those games, and I had a high-end remodeling company, and we had salesmen when we get into playing some games, and boy, did we get clobbered. And we traced it to a very specific type of game, and so that was a painful experience. So that I have learned, if anybody's using my computers here, I say you do not go anywhere but what you're supposed to do, because that lunchtime, that break time play, you go on your own phone. You don't mess my stuff up,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's a smart idea. That's where I'm talking in terms of putting forth a culture of saying, this is what we do, this is what we expect you to do, or to not do, while you are on our network in any way, shape, or form. And that kind of thing starts at the C level in the boardroom. That's not the IT department's responsibility. Their responsibility would be to say, you know what, we feel the best practice would be to institute multi-factor authentication, rather than just using a simple password, and saying, you know what, our requirements for password strength are set at the highest limit. So again, it's culture and technology that will give you the best chance to prevent an attack from getting through.
Let me ask you if you've seen anything related to what I'm about to ask you, because before the coronavirus, most people worked in an office, or at least worked most of the time in an office, and the company would give them a laptop and say, hey, this is your laptop to do your work, and it might have some security and some software, whatever. Okay. Now that a lot of people are working from home, well, exclusively now, and maybe a lot more in the future, have you started to see maybe people using more sort of personal computers, personal phones, hardware that is not owned by the company, that then they're connecting to the company network, to the company websites, and is that opening up additional vulnerabilities?
So yes and yes. We are. I don't know, but we're probably 90% of the population is working remotely in some sense or another. I don't know what percent, but whatever that percentage was, it has certainly risen significantly with people who are now using a personal device, personal laptop, personal computer from home, to access email or access software that they use in their day-to-day work. And even furthermore, the network in which they use to access that data. From your office, you're on a machine that probably has a latest and greatest paid subscription to Malwarebytes or Kaspersky or some sort of antivirus. At home, maybe if you're lucky, someone is using the free version of one of those same antivirus services. They're not the same. You don't get all the whistles and bells with the free version, obviously. And I'm using maybe not using a VPN, virtual private network, which is an encrypted network that goes across the internet. Probably not using multi-factor authentication, where I have to use a password and then a code is maybe sent to another device, or I would need a fingerprint in some of the stronger types of multi-factor authentication. So yeah, I mean those two things really have caused a drastic increase in the level of hacking activity that we're seeing right now. Drastic increase. I mean, this is Christmas and New Year's, Thanksgiving, and the birthday all rolled into one for a black hat hacker.
Wow. What size company do you start with that should start saying, hey, wait a minute, I need to sit down and talk to you guys at Liberty?
Really, any size company should take a look at their cyber vulnerability. Just because you were a 15 to 50 person business doesn't mean you are not a target. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. Certainly, larger organizations, once we get above the 500 employee mark, are, that's the elephant for a hacker. But those are the organizations that typically can afford some very sophisticated cyber prevention. So they're not necessarily the easiest to crack. It is the smaller businesses that 10 or 15 or more, even smaller, that they don't have an IT professional on staff. Maybe they're not using an MSP to monitor a firewall for them or monitor their email server. So those guys need to be particularly cautious of what they're doing, because they often don't have the fail-safes behind them, or in front of them, I should say, to prevent a hack. To give you an idea, a mechanical contractor not far here from Pittsburgh was doing business with a very well-known big box retailer back in 2013. Sal, I think you might know this story.
Yep.
Up in Sharpsburg, PA. These guys and you know how this big box retailer came to be a target, who knows? But there was information about this big box retailer on Microsoft's website, because this big box retailer used Microsoft to build all their infrastructure, all their tech infrastructure. And this big box retailer also had on their website a vendor portal for all the companies that they do business with. That's where this mechanical contractor would log in. And I think a hacker kind of put two and two together, and that mechanical contractor opened an email and clicked on a link that they shouldn't, and a hacker was now able to use that vendor to hack his way into Target's corporate network. And you know, somewhere near $20 million later, 110 million customer records were lost. So kind of give you an idea, you know, that company, that mechanical contractor, probably 50 people, 50 to 100 people is the size of that company. So if you're a small business and think you're not a target, think again.
Wow.
And JoAnn, by the way, this goes a little bit to something that you and I were talking in some of these previous videos, this whole concept of tangible versus intangible assets and their relative values. I mean, you could be a single individual that is a subcontractor to one of these companies just providing a particular service, but maybe because of an oversight, they may give you access to data that is theirs, that is invaluable. I mean, and now you have this, again, which can happen, this data physically residing on your laptop. And now you're taking this laptop with you all over the world on planes and restaurants because you're a subcontractor. You lose your laptop, and yes, it might be password protected, but eventually somebody's going to break through that. And again, you're a one-man operation to this other bigger company. And now this data that is extremely valuable, extremely sensitive, and it might even be sensitive in the realm of embarrassing people at the big company, you know, maybe some emails or, you know, whatever the case may be. And now this one person subcontract business has caused a huge damage to this other company with data on one laptop.
Mm-hmm. It does occur. And not all cyber policies, but again, some of your better ones will have coverages for a lost device. Furthermore, anytime you are using a device in that fashion, you should have through your IT department or your IT vendor the ability to detonate that device, be it a laptop, tablet, or phone. You know, even phones, I can get into my business email through my phone. So the ability to detonate that phone when it falls into the wrong hands, or that tablet or that laptop, that's important. That's important to have, and that's a technical measure.
Okay, by detonate, I'm imagining exploding. You know.
In essence, you were remotely wiping that device completely clean. You were severing it from all the sensitive data, and it's some more sophisticated IT measures here would be if once it's detonated, it's literally a paperweight. And if you were ever to fire up that laptop or tablet again and connect it to the internet, it is going to send a trace program back to the owner, so they would be able to track down the the person who stole it. So,
what do you see that needs to happen in two components? One, the legal system, and two, in the technology industry to protect us against these cyber attacks.
from a legal standpoint, boy, I mean, I would, I would think these hackers ought to be on the FBI's most wanted list. Really, because of the damage that they can create. Warren Buffett, who knows a thing or two about insurance, in one of his annual letters, I think it was the year before last, stated that the big one, the big one coming our way, mega catastrophic event, could be a cyber attack. So I think if that's not enough to really create, give this, the legal side of this some teeth to pursue these, to pursue hackers to the nth degree. For those of us on the ground who are trying to fight this, I think, as I stated, it's make sure you're using all the proactive technical measures that you can, that you can get, that you have at your availability. But we need to be very cautious as individuals. All the technology in the world is useless up against the right employee who is going to, foolishly click on that link and, let that payload find its way in, and the bots take effect, and then you're not going to know. That's one of the other myths of cyber attacks, is that instantly that you've been hacked. I've seen some statistics where it's upwards of 7 months that before a hack is revealed, and in that time, who knows how far the malware has gotten into your infrastructure, into the infrastructure of others that you do business with. So we need to be really cautious, really aware of, how we're communicating, what we're using to communicate, and kind of follow the safety procedures. Those who run organizations, they really need to focus on, we need to train our employees correctly and possibly retrain on a recurring basis to make sure that, because the threats will evolve and how these hackers get in will evolve. So we need to be constantly reminded of what to look for.
Hey, Russ, let me ask you a question, because we've been talking a lot about cyber attacks and hacking and ransomware and all this stuff in the context of, computers, laptops, that type of thing. But I know in certain circles, people are very worried about cyber attacks on other things. For example, the grid is always a big one, and other pieces of vital infrastructure. Not to mention the crazy things of somebody hacks my refrigerator. I don't know, maybe I don't care, but if they hack my self-driving car and drive me off a cliff, then I do care. From an insurance perspective, are you seeing a lot of people recognizing that risk and then not only taking the technical sort of countermeasures, but also insuring that type of risk?
Yes, we are. And it took, several large hacks. The city of Baltimore, for instance, their network was held for ransom, and they decided not to pay it. They didn't have the proper policies in place, and that ransom was held for quite a long time, and it cost the city of Baltimore probably 4 or 5 times what that ransom initially was. So I think in lieu of those things, and because of those things, I think large scale organizations are really beefing up their cyber policies. They went out and they're sometimes spreading that over 2 or 3 different carriers, to get the kind of coverage that they need.
Which definitely increases the cost of doing business.
Certainly does.
Yeah. Russ, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
Sure. Email is usually the fastest way. Russ York at libertyins.com is the best way to get a hold of me.
Repeat that and do that slower, please.
Sure. Russ York, RussYork at libertyins.com.
Okay. Sal, because I always forget and I want to make sure that we get the best way to contact you.
Very simple. Email is sal459 at yahoo.com. Again, sal459 at yahoo.com, or feel free to call me, area code 484-358-9470. Again, 484-358-9470.
Okay. And the best way to get in touch with me, Empress of Biz at gmail.com. That's Empress, EMPRESS of Biz, OFBIZ at gmail.com. And I love it when people call me, which the office number is 412-440-6969. That's 412-440-6969. As we do a wrap up, I mean, I could keep talking to you forever. I've got to ask you, what got you interested in this field?
Prior to coming to work for Liberty Insurance Agency, I spent a few years as a consultant, and in that time, even prior to that, I worked for a couple of software organizations, and so it was that tech piece of my background when I got into risk management that it really led me towards cyber. It was interesting to read, to study, to get into, and to learn about. So it was that background really that drove me in that direction.
Mm-hmm. What's your tip? Let's do a wrap up. What is your tip for people?
My tip for people, talk to your agent or give me a call. I'd be happy to help you out with advice, with anything that I know that I can help out with. Not all policies are created equal. There's a little cyber policy built into the package with most commercial property and casualty policies, with a very small limit and with a number of exclusions. Sometimes you might be a little surprised at what might not cover. So it's worth to have that discussion and really put that under the microscope these days. As Sal alluded to earlier, with while we're all working remotely on equipment and networks that weren't always intended for this kind of data, now's a great time to talk to your agent to find out where you're covered, see if there's gaps, and make sure you have a policy that takes care of those gaps. And number two, talk to your tech people and have them run a penetration test, find out where you're vulnerable, and seal those gaps as well.
Okay, good advice. Sal, what's your tip?
Well, my tip is and this is a little bit of a psychological thing, not a technical thing, but I think it's very important. Break through the psychology of it will never happen to me. Because I know we all fall prey to that, myself included. So my only tip is, it may not ever happen to you. Consider yourself lucky. But going back to your statistics at the beginning of the show, it is happening to somebody every couple of seconds. So break through the psychology of it'll never happen to me.
Right. And for someone who, this is kind of funny, but if you have pets at home, which some of us do, keep them away from your keyboard. Havoc can happen. I can guarantee you. And I have a cat who has decided that she lays on the keyboard. Well, you get a 12-pound cat laying on a keyboard, things happen. So, and watch the kids, because they can get into things. And we had a bad incident once with a client. The kids go on to sites they should have never gotten on, and they're smart. We have, So I want to thank you, Russ, for this conversation. I'm hoping people take this seriously, because evidently, just from looking at the statistics, this is an industry that is definitely growing, unfortunately. And that if you have any other news or anything, when you breaking news, you come on back and talk to us, okay?
Would love to. Would love to. And thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And Sal, you do the wrap up.
Well, Russ, thank you for joining us. I know this, by the way, was supposed to be a presentation that we were going to do live at the monthly networking lunches that we have over in the South Point area of Canonsburg near Pittsburgh here. I actually like the fact that we did it virtual, because now not only people in Pittsburgh, but people literally all over the world can listen to this and call you, by the way, from all over the world and seek your help and seek your advice. So, we're trying to spread the word. So thank you very much for joining us on this virtual forum, and hopefully we can spread the word and keep our fellow business people a little bit safer.
Yeah.
Love to. Thank you very much, Sal, for bringing me into this, and look forward to seeing you guys all at lunch again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.